Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of Uncanny Treks. I am Bob in Cascadia. That is Matt in the Southland. Tonight we are talking about X-Men Grand Design, the second miniseries, second Genesis from 2018. Matt, how the hell are you doing this evening?
Doing pretty good, Bob. Man, the issues that they cover here and the stories that they cover in this are like classic X-Men. This is the stuff you see a lot of in the cartoons, especially in the animated series. It's a lot of the stuff they covered there when we were younger. And I just remember having like copies of these as the X-Men classic issues.
We had very intermittent collection of X-Men Classic or Classic X-Men, because I think it was called both at different points. We had a very intermittent collection of those.
That was the name of the title, folks. X-Men Classic or Classic
Well,
X-Men.
it was
Yeah.
both. It shifted at some point. Then I did have the first part of the Claremont X-Men run in that essential phone book that was 20 odd issues in black and white. We had some classic issues from here and there in the run. In a way, I was surprised that this didn't even go a little further in the Claremont run. I didn't do the numbers on when this stopped, but I think it gets up to maybe the mid 80s in terms of the chronology of the Claremont run.
You have a lot of Kitty Pryde's history in this part.
To start out in issue number 1, we had a nice little irony already on page 2 where we find out that Sunfire joins the team because he wants to meet Jean Grey, which is ironic given that you might expect that to be Wolverine.
It would make sense, but at the same time, too, I remember our first introduction to Sunfire. He wasn't exactly pro X-Men, so you got to give him a reason to be there.
He's always portrayed as unenthusiastic about the whole thing. Then we've both shown that we're really positive on the series. Piskor does a great job with this. Definitely think it holds up way better in comparison than, say, Fantastic Four Grand Design or than even Hulk Grand Design. But I do have to slightly criticize it and say on page 5, you get a good example of why the postage format of these Grand Design books, which admittedly is less severe in X-Men Grand Design than in Fantastic Four Grand Design in particular, but this postage stamp format doesn't always work well. You got Thunderbird's death on page 5, and it's just not portrayed in a super strong way. You don't get much emotion off of it.
I'm glad you pointed this page out because it is one of the only confusing panels I noted in his whole run. As we've gone through this, I've noted that there have been some panels where I have no clue what's going on. Not necessarily with the X-Men, but through all the Grand Design books. This particular one, I had to stop and go back and be like, did I miss something? Because I know Thunderbird died. Unless you're familiar with the story, it's confusing. So that is one area. And that is a weird time too, especially X-Men immediately when they come back from Krakoa.
If I'm remembering correctly, you have Giant Size X-Men, then you have a 2-issue arc where they go to the mountain in Colorado that hosts NORAD, because NORAD is being attacked by Count Nefaria and his Anti-Men. That in the middle of the page.
Right.
Then Thunderbird and Nefaria fighting on the fighter jet, which that does happen, but yeah, it explodes. It's unclear that Thunderbird is dead, although you see it in the last panel on page 5 where Xavier is looking at the picture of Thunderbird in Vietnam. It's also very confusing to your point. The page before they start detailing this adventure to NORAD, it starts with Scott and Xavier, Cyclops and Xavier in a graveyard, and it's unclear to me who they're mourning in the graveyard. I don't think this is a mistake, but it almost seems this panel should be at the end of the page rather than the beginning.
I do want to go back real quick, Bob, to page 2 again. One of my favorite lines in this is when Banshee is recruited. He says, Banshee is the first recruit for the rescue mission. And then the first words out of Professor X's mouth is, who else looks promising?
Ouch.
I thought you would get a kick out of that since Banshee's one of your favorites.
Brutal. You got to stick the knife in. I didn't notice it when I was rereading it, but you just got to stick the knife in.
I also want to point out too, Bob, on page 3, oh my gosh, the Krakoa vines are always so nasty looking to me, and this is just always sick looking, and they did a really good job here with the art piece of capturing how nasty, the way that they're captured within the plants. It's not like poison ivy, how they're surrounding you. They're stuck in you. It's disgusting. Alien level stuff.
To use a loaded term, it's penetrative.
It's nasty. All right.
Skip ahead from the negative, which is to say my favorite X-Men getting insulted, the lack of pathos for Thunderbird's death, and intrusive vines. Let's skip to your favorite sequence in the issue, Matt.
My favorite sequence in the issue comes much later on page 11, where they've hinted that the Phoenix has been a pretty big thing throughout the entire Grand Design piece, which it wasn't in the original comics, given the Phoenix wasn't a thing until Claremont, correct?
Yeah.
Yes,
Exactly.
but with the Grand Design, we've seen that. Here we have Phoenix finally taking flight when they're having to escape the space station. If you're familiar with the whole Phoenix plot, she's the only one who can drive the spaceship back to Earth through Earth's orbit because of her ability to take Dr. Corbeau's mental. She's able to absorb his piloting skills and control the ship. As she's going back through the atmosphere, she's burnt to a crisp, and the way it is illustrated is insane. They use that white light I had mentioned in the
Mm.
previous issues we covered. They only use bright whites and blacks, and it stands out and glows. But you see her slowly disintegrate. Then on the next page, you see the Phoenix Force take over. You see her skeletal body, and then she's reborn as an
The white light on the black skeleton is particularly effective in the last panel on page 11 and one of the early panels on page 12. You see her reborn, right? Couldn't remember how this comic dealt with the Phoenix Resurrection, or the Jean Grey Resurrection, more precisely, not the Phoenix Resurrection, the Jean Grey Resurrection. And we don't get to the Jean Grey Resurrection in these two issues. We're going to see it in the next one. But it is interesting that I was hoping that they wouldn't go with the Jean Grey Resurrection from the comics because it's terrible. And it looks like they're going to do the Jean Grey Resurrection from the comics.
They definitely are, because you can see they've got the skeletal system turning into an adult female, turning into into an infant, which will be the cocoon beneath the thing, which is what happened in
Yeah.
the original.
Yeah, you're going to find her in that cocoon at the
Yeah.
bottom of
She's
Jamaica
been
Bay. Right?
reborn. Then on the
Yeah.
next page, Bob, on 13, you do have the actual Phoenix rising, which was famous.
Yeah.
You have the I am Phoenix, all that good stuff.
Yeah. No room for us to say I am life incarnate. Only room to say I am
No.
Phoenix, understandably. We get the Phoenix Saga early in the Claremont run. And even though Ed Piskor is obviously not Dave Cockrum, Piskor does a great job rendering all these Dave Cockrum designs from the Phoenix Saga. If you skip ahead a bit to page 16, the splash panel of the Imperial Guard is cool in front of the Imkron crystal. The couple of postage stamp panels of the Starjammers in action is cool. Neat to see Piskor draw these Dave Cockrum designs.
They look great. You got good action shots, really good. The still shots of them in poses in front of things. It seems just grand to look at.
Credit to Piskor for getting such an epic and grand feeling on so many small panels. That's a really tall order to have to do, and he manages it. Then, Matt, you get your beloved white effect at the bottom of page 16, and you really get it on page 17 and page 18.
They really overdo it. On page 17, Bob, I'm not a huge fan of a big blank page with a single word in the middle.
It works well, though, given how constrained it's been with these small panels through the whole series, to be so precious and conservationist of page real estate, like Piskor had to be to do this, then to just spend a whole page on a blank white thing with a coolly lettered blink. If you look in the lettering of blink, you can see the stars in it. That's really effective to go from being so parsimonious with your panel space to having a blank page.
Thematically, it does work because it is showing that the universe is no longer in existence and the Phoenix has to rebuild it with the help of the X-Men, which is why on the next page you have all of them holding hands and building it.
Like they're the action figures on your shelf, Matt.
Exactly, Bob. Looking at them now.
I did want to skip ahead a little or to page 19 and ask Matt, I assume you were deeply upset by the return of Mesmero, who's not just returned, which I'm sure is bad enough, but he's returned to perv on Sleeping Jeans.
He's super creepy now. When he's like green and purple, he's not as scary, but when he's this nasty Oscar the Grouch color, it's gross.
He's still green and purple generally, but he's shadowed in that panel. In the original Claremont run, if I remember correctly, Mesmero has an independent plan. Then Magneto takes it over. But here it's yet again, Mesmero is the servant of Magneto, which has been much more stressed in Piskor's version of Grand Design than I think was stressed in the original comics. Another thing I wanted to skip ahead to is page 23. And there's two things I absolutely love on page 23, Matt. One is the mad scientist goggles that Mora has on, Mora McTarget. And the other is the image of one of Jamie Madrox's dead dupes that's just blinked out. It's so gross. It's great.
He could feel the murder, which is scary.
Poor Madrox.
That's a rough life. Bob, we just came over something real quick. They reintroduce us to Beast in this, and Beast is now a blue furry guy, but they don't go into any detail about how he turned into that. Did that bother you at all? Do you feel like there needs to be some completionist here?
No.
I don't remember how Beast becomes the Blue Beast. And I wanted them to go into...
I've never read the comics where it's happened, and it's out of the X-Men book. And There's so much more interesting things that need to be covered by this.
I wonder though if those comics are any good because I don't think I've ever read them either, and you never really hear the retelling, which makes me think maybe it's a stupid story.
My impression is that they're not good, but that they are interesting because it's a moment. It happens in the early 70s when the comics code has loosened up, and that's when Marvel starts going back to horror comics. So they're doing Tomb of Dracula, they're doing Werewolf by Night. And I think Beast transformation is a part of that. And I think it's also interesting. Again, I haven't read this. I'm just going off what I've heard people say about him. But it sounds the way they write Beast in those, he's angry and bestial. So it's a bit a trial run for Wolverine.
Oh, more
And
of a
so,
horror aspect to it, maybe.
from what I understand, when Beast then joins the Avengers in the 70s, that's when he's turned back into a happy go lucky stoner guy who's best buds with Wonder Man. I don't know how much work they have to do to get him from the Berserker Beast to Stoner Beast, but that's my general understanding of the character trajectory there.
Okay. I guess that makes sense. They just didn't go into any detail. He just shows up as like, hey, I'm blue now. Okay, cool. No real explanation.
One other thing on 23, Matt, what do you think of Xavier's Shi'ar consort uniform on
I
the
mean,
bottom
he looks like
page of
Captain
20?
Picard.
Really big Starfleet energy, really big Starfleet energy. So, Matt, to jump ahead a little more in issue 1, on 27, we know you love a wide effect, but does it seem wrong to you that Dazzler gets a pretty similar wide effect to the Phoenix?
It shows that her mutant power is there out in the air. That's what it's trying to show, that the sound is blasting out of her, and that's the white part. But what
I
I find so fascinating, Bob, is that there was a villain called Dazzler in X-Men, like immediately after we stopped reading, I think.
Do you mean in the early 70s,
Ye-
immediately after the Silver Age?
Yeah, it was some robot called Dazzler or something stupid.
Weird.
I just want to throw that out there.
We see Dazzler. Honestly, I'm not bothered that she looks similar to the Phoenix. I just wanted to try to trigger you with that.
They went that way in the cartoon as well, if I'm not mistaken, didn't they? With the Dark
Oh, yeah,
Phoenix
yeah,
saga.
yeah. Yeah, she's involved in the Dark
Yeah,
Phoenix in the original comics, although my memory of it's pretty dim, to be honest.
Piskor always kills me here though, Bob. Is you got Jean Grey, they're in the club, and like Cyclops brought her there, and she immediately goes and starts kissing on Wingard with the mutton chops, man. That always threw me for a loop back in the day. Does not seem like he belongs in this time period, but I guess he does because this is the '70s, so that would totally be the look.
Matt's not a fan of the mutton chops.
So in my brain, I thought the mutton chops were meant for the 1800s when they tried to do the old school. They're on the ships, Hellfire Club people.
They're trying to say that it works for both.
That's what it's going for. Because even though I thought they looked dumb then, I thought they were.
Another interesting addition to the Dark Phoenix saga we get here, which I'm pretty sure is not in the original Dark Phoenix comics, although God knows it's been maybe 10 years since I've reread those, is on page 30, Emma Frost making moves on Cyclops while Mastermind makes moves on Phoenix. And that's pretty funny given the subsequent Emma and Scott relationship. It's nice to see that here, which I don't think are in the original comics.
I think that was probably added for effect. Once again, Scott always has to be in a triangle, no matter what, even from the
It's very
beginning.
important. You need Emma there, or you need Psylocke there, you need Angel there, you need somebody there.
Angel, yeah, or Wolverine, always in
Yeah.
a triangle.
Another cool effect I wanted to point out, this is jumping a bit ahead, is to a climax in Dark Phoenix, is on 38, where you have the X-Men confronting Dark Phoenix at her parents' house. On the one hand, you get another interesting variation of Matt's beloved white effect, which is here, it's the white energy streaming out of Dark Phoenix's eyes and mouths, which is horrifying and cool. But you also get on that same row of panels, Xavier exerting his telepathy and bleeding out both of his noses, which is colored in an interesting way. It's running down his white teeth. On the one hand, the bloody nose is a real cliche when you're visually representing telepathy, but I can't think of Xavier using the cliche often. So it's fun to see the cliche applied to Xavier, and it's well done with how much effort and exhortation Piskor draws in both Dark Phoenix and Xavier's face on this row of panels on 38.
I want to point out how scary Dark Phoenix is depicted with the facial expressions, the scary white eyes. He did the glowing eye thing again. And her hair, man. Her hair, it's not straightened.
It almost looks like it's turned into Medusa snakes. A lot of the hair is wavy, but also sticking up as if it's animate on its own. Her face looks like both very evil and also very aged. You can tell the toll the Phoenix Force is taking on her body.
It depicts her more a monster.
We go from her looking as the Black Queen, looking still conventionally attractive, but with a hardness to her face and an evilness to her face. And when she makes the transformation into Dark Phoenix, even before she goes and she eats the planet, right? She looks like this, but we get the really good look of it in this telepathic duel between Professor X and Dark Phoenix. Yeah, the next panel, she's back to a fairly normal presentation as Phoenix looking like Jean Grey.
You can see the distinction between there. The way the lines in her hair, the lines he used to draw her face. She's got her pupils back, which is nice.
This leads up to the climax from the Dark Phoenix saga. People are probably broadly familiar with this if you're at all following along our discussion, right? It's the most famous X-Men story, pretty much. Then the other moment I wanted to talk about was the death of Dark Phoenix, although it's Phoenix in control of Dark Phoenix, or the death of Jean Grey here on, this is page 40, and we see the weapon on the dark side of the moon come out. We see Matt's beloved black and white silhouette effect as the weapon gets her. Then I like the last panel on page 40 of all that's left after the weapon fires is you've got the yellow classic Marvel Girl mask because she was wearing that costume and the black smoke blowing out from it.
That's scary. And of course, you've got Scott yelling Jean, which when you hear Scott talk, you hear the X-Men cartoon Scott Summers, correct?
I don't really have as much of an audio track in my head when I read as some people do, but if I think about it, yeah, it would definitely be a voice actor from X-Men 92.
We've had this discussion before, I know, on air, and it is always fascinates me how we end up picking certain voices for certain characters. Because it's strange, because Professor X to me is still Patrick Stewart. But Wolverine is always the voice from the X-Men series. It's never going to be Hugh Jackman in my head.
My addition to that is if it's a well-done Xavier scene, it's probably Patrick Stewart. But if it's a histrionic Xavier scene, and I think about it, I'm hearing X-Men the Animated Series.
There you go. That's a good distinction.
Moving on to issue number 2, I rather expected, given how heavy the focus on issue number 1 was with Jean and the Phoenix, and also I couldn't exactly remember how issue number 2 unfolded, but I rather expected issue 2 to be more focused on, in the background, getting ready to resurrect Jean Grey. Obviously, that's not the focus of the Claremont run after Dark Phoenix saga. There's a lot else going on, so that wouldn't necessarily be the most faithful way to do it. But in the same way that the first 2 issues of the first miniseries of X-Men Grand Design were filled with Phoenix stuff and Shi'ar stuff in the background as a building thing, I thought we might get more of that. But no, instead, on the first page of issue number 2, we get the introduction of Rogue, which is really cool because in some ways this issue puts Rogue as the replacement for Phoenix as a character, the replacement for Dark Phoenix. It's a flipped narrative arc of where we see the fall of Jean into Phoenix, into Dark Phoenix. In this issue, we see the redemption of Rogue from being the stepdaughter of Mystique to joining the X-Men, right?
You just see a different path for a character to join the X-Men, whereas in the previous issue, we saw Kitty Pryde. Here we see Rogue. Yeah. I feel like Psylocke is a big part of the next one, and then Jubilee.
I honestly don't remember. I'll have to see as we skim through this, but I don't remember Psylocke showing up in these issues, but I think in the actual Claremont run, she would be an important part of this era, now that you say that.
Grand Design, she's in the next set.
Okay. Do you remember if they bring her in as the old version, or do they just bring her in and she's already taken his body and she's Ninja Psylocke?
My understanding is there's a lot of confusion about it, considering, especially with Grand Design. So I think that's going to be a good discussion when we actually read that.
Okay.
We're going to cover that one next week.
Next week is the plan for the final X-Men Grand Design.
I read a couple of reviews, and I do know that Psylocke's inclusion, there's something off about it that it bothered people in the reviews.
I don't remember that. It's been quite a few years since I've read this series, so I'm looking forward to revisiting that.
I will say, though, Bob, opening up this book and seeing Miss Marvel as our main character here, it was interesting.
Miss Marvel, who will eventually be Captain Marvel. And it's a cool introduction of Rogue because for the second row of panels on that first page, she's menacing Miss Marvel, but Rogue herself is off panel, right? We just see her hands reaching out for Carol Danvers. And then when she takes Carol Danvers' power and inadvertently takes her personality, we get a similar white and black effect to what we were seeing with the Phoenix last issue.
We're back to that again.
So just one other thing, though, is I just wanted to say Rogue also she's portrayed as a like shorter and a bit more solid than she usually is. She actually looks like a kid here a lot more, which is cool.
With the green outfit thing that she has here, this would have been early 80s, right?
Early 80s into mid 80s, yeah.
She gets an 80s teenager look to her at this point, which is interesting. It's not the
Yeah.
rogue you typically see.
To your point, really does make her a foil for Kitty Pryde, not just a foil for Jean Grey.
Just over how she's written too, the confusion over Miss Marvel's powers and how she's absorbed them. You don't get the confidence you get in the rogue we typically see in comic books in this issue.
Yeah. If there's nothing else on the early pages you wanted to look at, the next thing I wanted to look at was page 6, where Dr. Doom turns Storm into a chromium statue.
I forgot about that. It was crazy. On that specific page, on page 6, where we see her turned into that, it reminds me, didn't this happen to the Thing as well or something at one point?
I'm sure it might have.
He turns Dr. Doom has a thing with this, turning people into statues. This isn't. What did you think, though, of the top part of page 6, where you have the 4 different characters that have been captured, and you got Myra McTaggart, Lily Rasputin, Stevie Hunter, and then Kira Yoshida. They've all been kidnapped by Dr. Doom, but it's just their heads. That's the weird part. I almost thought they were decapitated.
The implication is their body is encased in the machinery, but yeah, it does look like they've been decapitated. I love the expressions on all of them, but particularly Moira's angry expression and Mariko's surly expression are really fun.
Poor Lily Rasputin. She's just so sad. Why is this happening to me?
Fun stuff. On 7, we got a great page too, where we have not only has Cyclops Scott Summers mistaken Madeline Pryor for Jean Grey on first meeting her, we see Magneto mistaking Madeline Pryor for Jean Grey when he first meets her. Although Magneto, like Rogue, is wholly off page, but that's a very fun page of comics.
After they've shipwrecked on an island in the mid-Atlantic, so the listeners know what's happening.
Yeah, because under Dr. Doom's influence, Storm's weather powers have gone quite crazy.
Yeah, drove them straight to the island with Magneto on it. To that magnetism.
There's some great stuff on the ensuing pages. I didn't have all that much to talk about. I was going to jump pretty far ahead, but you have Spider-Woman punching a Morlock. We get to see Forge again. I'm looking at Forge on page 11. The design for Forge is cool.
I do want to point out Kitty Pryde's ugly outfit on page 8. I always forget about this. Do you remember when she did this in the comics?
Oh, yeah, I remember. I agree with you that this Sprite outfit is awful, but I would say I think Kitty in the classic yellow and black X-Men costume also looks terrible, especially when the other X-Men are not in it. That would be my question. Even though I agree with you that this is all bad, right? These are not good Shadowcat costumes. But would you prefer her in the classic outfit or this outfit? Both look pretty rough in different ways.
I prefer Kitty Pryde in.
That's a good costume, and you don't have the option of a good costume.
You're talking about wearing either the New Mutants outfit.
Yeah, the yellow and black, which we see her back in on page 9.
Next page. I prefer the yellow and black, honestly, at that. I don't know what you're smoking.
To me, the yellow and black looks bad when she's the only one in it.
When they're not all together in it.
I don't even love it when all the X-Men are in it. I love the New Mutants comics, but in the early New Mutants comics, when they're all in the yellow and black, that's some rough going. It just gives the whole thing a monotone appearance.
How did you feel, Bob, about page 10 with Caliban looking like Killer Croc?
Oh, I don't think about Caliban at all.
Dang, Bob. I learned something interesting yesterday. I did not know that originally the design for the Thing was, this is off topic here, but the design for the Thing was originally supposed to be reptilian. And Jack Kirby, in an interview, said he started off with a dinosaur look. Then it evolved into the rock hardened plates, but the rock is meant to be Stegosaurus scales type thing. It's meant to evoke more reptilian look. What Killer Croc eventually becomes, which is funny because I remember that transformation scene that we have of the Thing. He does transform to look like Killer Croc at that one point. I was like, oh, okay, I see where they went with that.
Yeah, that makes sense with the fact that Kirby and Lee were really working on those kaiju comics for Marvel.
Right,
early 60s, right before Fantastic Four.
Caliban's design here in this does evoke the Killer Croc look.
Matt, speaking of a pleasing reptilian skin texture, if you jump to page 20, you get to see Brood Storm or Sleazoid Storm, and it's such a cool look.
We get the Brood invasion here and cool stuff going on.
Klops, he's still got his visor on. That's great.
I remember reading these issues specifically, going back and rereading them as an adult because I was interested in the Brood Saga stuff and what actually went down in the early Claremont
We didn't have Brood comics as kids. We had a crappy novelization of it.
Yes, and it didn't cover everything. You got
Without
the
Carol
Brood.
Danvers for sure.
What's fascinating though is the way the Brood capture the X-Men is the same way that Krakoa does. It's just red instead of green
Yeah.
tentacles.
The Brood are also one of 3 different alien knockoffs that Claremont did in the 80s.
There was actually an earlier alien invasion at the mansion with Kitty Pryde. I thought, wait a minute, I don't remember the Brood saga happening this early, but it wasn't the Brood.
It's one of those demons that live underneath the earth near the mansion that you meet in one of the first issues after Giant Size X-Men #1.
Those demons randomly show up in Winchester, New York, just pop up out of there.
Yeah.
Going back to your question about you're mentioning the designs, Wolverine, I really want an action figure of Wolverine as a Brood. They've yet to make one, or actually they have made one. Does not look the way I want it to. I want one with wings. I want it to have the halfway face. It's got to have the hair sticking out with the way it looks here. But I will say I love the character. I love the design of Wolverine as a Brood.
I do have an important question for you. So we get to see 2 great hits in the second issue. One is on page 26 where Binary, aka Miss Marvel, aka Carol Danvers, punches Rogue into orbit. And one is on page 30 where Maddie slaps off Cyclops' sunglasses. And I was curious which you preferred.
I like where Maddie knocks off Scott's sunglasses. There's something about that.
Yeah, she does it because he asked if she's the reincarnation of Jean Grey after he's proposed to her. And it's like, you shouldn't ask, but if you are going to ask, maybe you should ask before you propose. Although if you'd asked before you propose, would she still have said yes? I guess there's an important psychological game here.
The way this is drawn, too, what I love about it is when she knocks the glasses off, Scott's eyes are covered, and Dark Phoenix in the background. Maddie's trance looks like Dark Phoenix, the way she's drawn here. She's got really muscular. She's got that scary look we talked about in the face. Her hair's done differently. She's got the costume on. Then in the next panel, it goes back to being Madeline Pryor, who's drawn more like a normal woman. So you can see how they distinguish between those two.
And it's a little questionable. Is this Scott's imagination or is this a connection?
Right, which was the case when reading the original comics, which was fascinating. It doesn't have the best payoff, though.
Speaking of unfortunate interpersonal relationship dynamics, romantic relationship dynamics, Matt, I wanted to jump to 33, where we see Colossus and Shadowcat leaving a date movie, and it's The Thin Blue Line by Errol Morris, a documentary about a guy getting framed for a crime, if I remember correctly. I don't know, that's a great date movie. Hey, go to this documentary that's a downer about the American legal system.
Yeah, well, and Kitty points out, Bob, that it was scarier than Freddy. Or Nightmare on Elm Street.
I didn't realize Ed Piskor was such an Errol Morris fan. That's funny. But I only have one other page I want to highlight from this issue. I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to look at before I close this down by looking at page 38.
I did want to point out on 34, Bob, the change in style. Did you notice this? Everything when they go to the Morlocks, the backgrounds become completely black. It's weird. All they've done is made the outline black as well, but it takes you out of it. It changes things when they move toward the Morlocks. They always make everything black and dark.
It's an effective coloring choice. I also think it's pretty funny how good Caliban's dental hygiene is compared to how bad Callisto's dental is.
Caliban with the good genes.
That's pretty good. How sinister Callisto is here, especially given how heroic she's been recently in books like Marauders, is fun.
You were going to jump to...
I like on 38 where we see Mystique in disguise as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Val Cooper. She's got these reflections in her sunglasses. This is an amazing big splash panel on the top of 38 that I really dig.
The comics here that are being covered in this last part of Grand Design with Storm, we actually covered when we did X-Men 97 because they adapted this into a 2-part episode.
It's a larger story arc, but there's one story that happens during the story arc, a single issue called Life Death is particularly famous and beloved. And a little bit, dear listeners, like Matt is a Philistine who thinks This Man, This Monster is overrated. I'm a Philistine who thinks Life Death is overrated. I don't know if we're fully doing Life Death yet, but this is the story arc that leads up to Life Death.
I'm not going to lie, Bob. I agree with you. I did not enjoy Life Death. I did not think Life Death was that great. It's specifically the Forge's house being like a saw trap or something. Wasn't that part of the story?
Yes, but not in a sinister way. He lives in this really elaborate skyscraper, I think called One Eagle Plaza in Dallas. He seems to have a lot of the top floors to himself, and so it's an elaborate environment. But it's not like Storm is stuck there in a Forge is a serial killer sort of way.
She is trapped there, though.
Yeah, but she's trapped there because she doesn't have her powers and she's being hunted. They're not really in the grand design, but she's being hunted by the dire wraiths. I'm not saying that Forge has nothing to answer for in that story, but I want to make it clear that Forge is not some serial killer.
No. And Forge has created a gun that does take away mutants' powers. That is the
Yeah.
issue here.
I think he describes it in House of X Powers of 10 as the worst thing I ever did, a gun that makes us like them.
If you're familiar with the story, you do know that Storm gets shot, loses her powers, and that's what culminates
Yeah.
here.
So that's an interesting cliffhanger too. And I wanted to ask, were you surprised at this? Seemed to me maybe not, and I'm not criticizing this. I think this is well done, but it seemed to me to be a fairly surprising place to end this miniseries in particular, right? With depowered Storm in the middle of a storyline.
It really is, but I struggle to think of what else they could end it with that would have an emotional note.
No, that's
Storm
a good
losing her
point.
powers and being depressed is sad. It's an I understand that. I'm trying to think of what else was happening at this time that they could have put there instead or finish it off with.
I don't know. Maybe you could have ended it with a sinister note about Mystique's infiltration into the U.S. government, but I don't know if that would have been as dramatic. And we'll have to see. God, it's been 10, getting to 15 years since I read the Claremont run. We'll have to see what stories they pick up in the start of the final miniseries, Extinction.
They probably could have gone full circle and just done something with Rogue at the end.
My initial expectation would be they would have gotten to the resurrection of Phoenix or Jean already.
Yeah.
But obviously, we saw with this issue that the focus is much more on Storm, Rogue, and Shadowcat, right, than it is
Right.
Phoenix, which is in some ways is frankly refreshing given how much Phoenix and Jean have loomed over the first 3 issues of X-Men Grand Design.
I will say that the bottom of it says, next comes Extinction.
Dun, dun, dun.
So,
All right. Join us in a week for us wrapping up X-Men Grand Design. Thanks for being with us on this journey through Silver Age X-Men and then through this very abbreviated but very cool version of the Claremont run that Ed Piskor did for us. We are Uncanny Treks. I'm Bob in Cascadia. That's Matt in the Southland. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks for listening.